Welcome to Microdose Psychedelic Insights, powered by the Conscious Fund. This is the PsyFi series, discovering the cutting-edge science and research in psychedelic medicine.
There we go.
Can you see me?
Yep, I can see you. I can hear you. We're perfect.
Okay, perfect. Let's you're going to see my ear again because I like walking around when I'm talking.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. That's all good.
So where were we?
Yeah, do you remember where we left off?
Yeah, we were talking about sort of sovereignty.
Yeah,
I believe
over your own
I
mind
can't.
and the powers that be that
Sovereignty.
don't really want that to happen, right?
Well, potentially. I mean, I'm not entirely sure if they don't want it to happen, but that's the way it's occurred. I would imagine, at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, big business is about offering as much profit as they possibly can to a select few shareholders. And that's why people are put into a position of responsibility and power to run businesses. I hope that changes, and I hope that somewhere along the line that more holistic, more empathetic, caring, loving narrative will come out of this. I mean, it's very, very interesting, Gaurav. And I spoke to you about this a few weeks ago. The addiction industry is really one of the oddest industries in the world. People who are going to recovery centers, et cetera, that industry is growing at such a rate, but it's growing based on failure.
Mm-hmm.
People are not getting recovery in rehabs. The success rate is appalling.
Yeah.
It's very, very, very minimal. And if we look at what rehabs, most rehabs work off the 12-step scenario. They work out with the fellowships, which is a very shame-inducing narrative. You go there, you're told you're an addict. Yeah, you're going to be an addict for the rest of your life. Then you're told you're diseased. I mean, what a horrible word to label anybody with it.
Yeah, I understand.
And then you're told that you're actually a burden on your friends, family, and society, and for that reason, you're not to be trusted. And you're not to be trusted to such an extent that, we're going to give you a sponsor, and your sponsor is going to help you do your thinking, and your thinking is going to be based around our gospels. And these are the 12 traditions and 12 steps. And you've got to attach to them, because if you do not attach to them, you will end up in jail, institution, or dead. And if you're a good boy or a good girl, we'll reward you with colored key rings. And you have to be really, really, really grateful for what we're giving you. And you've got to turn up basically for the rest of your life. But these are really, really subjugating, accusatory, negative, finger-pointing narratives. And if we really look at the narratives which bring people into addiction in the first place, they're very, very, very similar to these, just wrapped up in a different type of bullshit. But, addiction itself is certainly people are self-medicating against feeling inauthentic. And we have to wonder why people are feeling inauthentic. Well, it's because their family and their culture and their society say to them constantly through education, through bullying, through whatever, that people are not good enough. Yeah. We don't like you the way you are. We want you to be this. Does that make sense to you when I say that, Gaurav?
Yeah, it absolutely makes sense to me. I think there's a couple of things that you bring up. Obviously, the discussion about Alcoholics Anonymous and 12-step programs that we've discussed and debated quite a bit. But more so, I think that's interesting to me is you bring up the idea of how a lot of these mental constructs and concepts that may be reinforced by these programs are actually what bring people into the program to begin with, and it's about finding identity.
Absolutely.
It's about finding identity and refinding yourself. And I do think that maybe in some ways that message is lost with the 12-step program, and the benefits of something like Iboga is that it really helps you kind of wipe the slate clean. In my experience, it was very similar to a rebirth. And being born, maybe when you're an infant, you don't have too much of a recollection of it. But when it happens again in your older life, it's kind of a disorienting, jarring process. Couple of days after Ibogaine can be confusing and scary, because now your pathways are interrupted and you're not immediately reaching for the same coping mechanism you were before, but it's not like you have developed new ones yet. Only so much has happened during that time. And so now, in this really neuroplastic period of how your brain is functioning, it's really important to instill new behaviors, and aftercare is really important. And so this new model of this new paradigm of recovery, which incorporates the medicine and the aftercare and the way that you work, which I'd love to get into, where you talk to your patients before they even take the Iboga and follow up with them during and after, presents a really novel new model.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest problem with the existing models which are occurring now, my biggest fear about this new psychedelic renaissance going on, is that, the money people will go, well, what is our existing model? What is our existing protocol for helping people get out of addiction? Well, let's attach that to psychedelics.
Mm-hmm.
It simply won't work.
Right.
It doesn't work now, and it certainly won't work with psychedelics, because, the fact is that psychedelics bring down your defense mechanisms. They allow you to have an opportunity to have a relationship with your authentic self, to tear down the conditioned narratives that have been fostered upon you by culture, by society, by family.
Mm-hmm.
That is the reason that people are in addiction. It's because they don't know who they are. They feel inauthentic. And if you feel inauthentic and you feel fearful, the first thing you're going to do is turn to a ritual to make yourself feel safe.
Of course.
And that is what addiction is. It's a ritual to make yourself feel safe. It's really interesting, Gaurav, because, there seems to be this sort of narrative that, people in addiction are out of control. No, they're not out of control. It's completely the opposite.
Yeah.
The addiction is the thing that they put into their life to feel some control. Because if you're racking out a line of coke or you're cooking up some heroin, in that moment, you are... I was just on a roll there.
Oh, I know, man. It was a really good point that it cut out.
So, yeah, should we just try and find our way back to that somehow?
Absolutely.
So I think what I was talking about earlier on was this idea that through childhood conditioning, which is a cultural, societal, and familial conditioning brought on by our education and our expectations, or the expectations of who we should be. Many a child finds that they have to reject a part of their psyche to become an actor, to be able to fit into the environment they're in. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you are rejecting a part of yourself as a child, that actualizing tendency, the real authentic you, because you're being told the whole time you're not good enough, you need to pull your socks up, why don't you do this, why don't you dress like that, I think that you should is the classic line that we hear in childhood. And it's really an aggressive piece of conditioning, because what it really says to the 6 or 7 or 8 year old child, I think you should, means I don't like you the way you are. I want you to behave in the way that I want you to. And so a child will always feel compelled to try and make that work for him. Compelled to do what the parent or the teacher wants, because they want to be fitting in, they want to feel safe.
Right.
So to fit into that, they have to reject a part of their authentic self, become an actor, become what other people want them to become. And so a lot of us grow up with this huge emptiness in our chests because we really don't know who we are, because we've rejected our authentic self on the way.
Yeah, I think
And that's what addiction is about.
You were talking before we got disconnected about control, and how in that moment when someone's racking up a line of cocaine or cooking up some heroin, in that moment, the person at least feels that they are in complete control, you know, and that's a really comforting, it's a very comforting thing for them, right?
Absolutely, irrespective of what the outcome is.
Right.
In that moment when you're cooking up or racking out a line, your worries around your family, the world, your job, your place in it, whatever, falls away. You're in the moment. You're actually being incredibly mindful for one moment.
It's so true, right? You're so present. It's like you don't even need to meditate, just in that moment.
Absolutely. And why wouldn't you? You know, for me, I think that, and I think this is a really important thing to say, you know, if you're an 18 or 19-year-old or 25-year-old, and, you know, I ask my clients often, you know, what did that heroin give you? Or what did that cocaine give you when you first started using? And almost all of them just say, well, you know, it gave me a sense of peace, a sense of belonging, a sense of confidence. It took me to a better place.
Right.
Now, if something like that takes you to a better place, hang on 1 second.
Sure.
1 second. Sure.
It's okay.
So,
good.
We're talking about this idea of putting control into your life. Yeah, is that where I was? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've had a complete memory blank now.
That's okay. No, I agree. It's like, you know, we talk about being, you know, it's had a really interesting conversation with Joey over at Inscape in Mali Nalco, who you know. And we talked about what is the opposite of addiction, you know, like what is the word? There's not really a word, you know, but I guess it would be presence, or being present, you know, because addiction, you're always running, right? You're always running away from your life, your emotions, and your reality. You are so uncomfortable with the present moment. But then what an interesting paradox, because when you have the drugs, and you're right, not considering the outcome of after you push off or snort that line or whatever.
You don't give a damn. You don't give a damn about the outcome.
Right, you don't care about that. But in that moment, and preceding it, you're very present, you know, because that's the only thing that really makes you okay with being present until you use the drug, and then truly you're not present anymore, you know, because you're pretty disconnected from.
Yeah. This is what I was saying, but to begin with, addiction is about making yourself present. There's no two ways about it. It makes you feel confident. It makes you feel like you can talk to the girls at the bar or hold your own with the boys. It makes you feel confident. It makes you feel like you can finish your university work. It takes you to a place where you are not you for a little while. And, you know, that tells me something important, that, you know, if drugs, when you first use them, make you feel good, what the hell was going on before? And, you know, I often say to my clients, you know, well, what happens if you hadn't picked up coke at 18 or heroin at 25? And to a man and to a woman, most of them will say, well, you know, the outcome's terrifying. I don't even want to think what that outcome would have been because my life was so appalling. So that says to me that actually picking up drugs to begin with is a perfectly acceptable and intelligent, adaptive response to the pain that you were in. And if you didn't, what would have happened to you?
Right. Yeah, we talked about this, you know, and for a lot of people that probably would have meant not continuing their existence, you know. So like, as unfortunate as their addiction was, the silver lining to all of this is that there's a way out. There's wisdom to be gained from trying that coping mechanism, and eventually a lot of people do learn more about themselves in the end.
Yeah, I think, to begin with, addiction, opens the door to a place where you feel safe and comfortable. The
Mm-hmm.
problem is if you continue to use your alcohol or your coke or your heroin, I mean, it's slightly different with opiates because there's that physical addiction.
Right.
But, if you continue to open this door to a place where you don't feel yourself and you feel more comfortable, et cetera, if you start to do it too much, after
Mm-hmm.
a month or 2 months or a couple of years or a decade or whatever your time scale will be, that door to another reality will quickly become a revolving door.
Mm-hmm.
And then you find yourself
Absolutely.
in a very, very, very painful place. And I think young Pueblo, to paraphrase him, is, he describes, he says, I don't believe that, someone is addicted to coke or crack or heroin. What they're addicted is to filling the void they feel in their chest with anything other than self-love. Now, what's interesting to me is, where did that void come from? And earlier
Right.
we talked about the rejected child. Now, if you reject a part of yourself, there's going to be an emptiness.
Yeah.
So, this is where the Ibogaine, this is where the psychedelics come in, because they help you connect to that rejected part of you. And if you can bring that rejected child, that rejected part of you up to the table and introduce them to the other aspects of your personality, then you will start to feel complete. Then you will start to feel like you know yourself. Then you will start to feel authentic. And if anybody ever said to me, what is addiction? Name it in one sentence. I would say it's self-medicating against feeling inauthentic.
Yeah.
So maybe the journey into addiction and out of addiction is the opportunity to find your own authentic narrative and get to understand who you are. And if we look at, the ancient Greeks and we talk about Socrates, and Socrates, what's the most important thing a man can do? Well, it's to know himself.
Mm-hmm.
Know thyself. Well, maybe this process, this journey, is an opportunity to really get to know yourself and to break down those conditioned narratives that are fostered upon us at a cultural, societal, familial, and religious level since the moment we breathe.
Right. That's
That's the
really
thing that holds us into bondage.
that's really cool. I like that because in one way, just through my own journey, throughout all of this, I kind of looked at it as an opportunity as well. Of course,
Absolutely.
there's times that are very challenging, and for many people, they don't get to see the other side of that opportunity, especially today. Especially drugs, are becoming a lot more dangerous. It's not like alcohol where you kind of have more of a margin of error. But that said, to the people who are seeking recovery and seeking to better themselves, and to find themselves, like you're talking about, I think it's really fascinating because the process of addiction and recovery, that journey offers you such powerful insight that a lot of people find themselves not just going back to baseline and going back to who they were before they picked up drugs, because no one wants to go back there, right? Like we picked up drugs
No, they don't.
in that place to begin with. But the cool thing is that a lot of people are finding a much richer and a much more fulfilling life,
See, what's very interesting about what you said there, Gaurav, is that if you want to find out who the hell you are, the most important thing is to find out who the hell you're not.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's absolutely essential to work out how you have been conditioned by either friends or family or society or education. And if you can have an understanding of that, then you kind of know why you're lost. And if you know why you're lost,
Do you remember what point you were wrapping up before we got disconnected?
no, I've got no idea now. I'm completely instinctive in the way I talk, and
Yeah,
there's
yeah, it's
no
okay. let's
just
talk.
comes out.
Let's
So
talk about. So, what do you know? One of the things that we connected about, especially when I was in Mexico with the microdose team working on this documentary, was global
Mhm.
drug policy. And I think you are in a very unique position to talk about that. Obviously, when it comes to the war on drugs and the intersection of psychedelic medicine and mental health, addiction's a really huge component of that. So, what do you hope to see? In the years that come, as far as legislation, what do you want to see from policymakers, and how can we shift public perception and just the public viewpoint around these substances to integrate them back into our modality of healing and treatment?
well, I think there's quite a lot of good work going on at the moment, and you've got a lot of high class sort of researchers and academics and universities who are now getting interested in what I would call a new psychedelic renaissance occurring at the moment. And the more that these people get involved, and to a certain extent, I think the more that business gets involved, the more barriers are being broken down. But we have to be really, really careful about who handles the future of psychedelic medicines, because it can be done very, very, very wrong.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there is you asked me that question earlier, and you're wondering what about the perception of the general public around things like Ibogaine and ayahuasca and how they label them as drugs,
Right.
or I mean, yeah, oddly enough, I did a lecture last night, and that was one of the questions that came up. And I mean, unfortunately, plant medicines are considered to be drugs. And, we spoke earlier about the fact that, a lot of people say, well, how can you use drugs to get off drugs? When there's no sort of real language behind Subutex or methadone or Lyrica or
Right.
antidepressants or any of those sort of
Right.
things. I do think there's been a cultural shift being going on. I think people are really, really beginning to wake up to the potential around psychedelics. And of course, there's always going to be a lot of pushback as well against them, because there's a lot of fear attached. And, it's kind of ironic at the end of the day, but the one thing which kind of breaks down the fear of psychedelic is psychedelics.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I like that.
I kind of, it does worry me. There's a lot of people who are getting involved in the psychedelic field at the moment who actually do not know what it is to take psychedelics and how they can help you. And it really, really worries me when I see, courses for psychotherapists or doctors, etc., about learning to integrate the plant medicine experience, but there's no prerequisite that they've actually tried and experienced these substances for themselves. It just seems crazy. How the hell can you get involved in that industry if you don't understand it?
I see an interesting parallel to rehabs and addiction counselors that were never addicts themselves. And not to say I
Yeah.
haven't met a few that are just really, really good at what they do and claim at least not to have a history themselves. But obviously, the ones I have met that have recovered themselves have really profound and deep insight to share. Plus, automatically, just like when you walk into an AA meeting, kind of how they talk about in the big book, about how it's like you have this connection with everybody that's gone through it, because it's like you're all survivors of a shipwreck. You might not have known each other on the ship, but for sure now you all have something in common that you hold together, And I think the psychedelic experience is very similar, if not pretty much the same as that, especially when you're trying to share it and pass it on to someone else in a therapeutic setting. I think that wisdom and that knowledge and that experience is invaluable.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think, what psychedelics do so well is break down these defense mechanisms that we put up. And I do kind of agree that, you know, a well prepared and well cared for psychedelic experience can be the equivalent of 10 or 15 years of psychotherapy in one night. You know, these epiphanies can be made. And, you know, also these epiphanies are very, very, very personal to the individual. Yeah.
Right.
So the good therapist is there to hold the individual and to encourage and to help them integrate. It's not about us telling the client what to do. It's about us helping the client realize who they can be on their terms and with their narrative. And I do quite a lot of training of people to do this work. And, you know, the one people who really, really, really frighten me when they come in and ask for training are actually psychotherapists.
Yeah. Why
because,
is that?
you know, well, because their training itself, the parameters and the boundaries and the ethics are so very, very distinct and very particular. But actually, to become a psychotherapist and to work within that field, you have to work within very, very, very defined boundaries.
Right.
And if you're working with psychedelics, you're running over those boundaries in massive, massive ways the whole time.
Right. Absolutely.
You know, so there is this idea, and it does frighten me in respect that, you know, certainly if I fell into addiction now, I certainly wouldn't be turning to a doctor to give me my psychedelic experience. I wouldn't be turning to a registered psychotherapist within the BAPC or the UKPC, which are the British governing bodies. I wouldn't be turning to them unless they've been through addiction themselves and they've got out of addiction because they've had psychedelics.
Right.
It's like a train driver teaching someone to be an astronaut.
Right.
Yeah, I want to be taught by the right people.
Yeah.
I want to be guided by the right people. I want to be guided because this is my life at the end of the day. Yeah. And you know, we see this the whole time within, you know, I said this before, Gaurav, it really, really, really terrifies me, this idea, and I'm sure this is probably the route that psychedelia will go down unless we can get some really, really good leaders. Yep. But if it's all about the money men running the show, they're going to be looking at the existing modalities and trying to connect that to psychedelia, psychedelic work. An existing modality for, you know, getting out of addiction and getting into recovery is the 12 steps. 12 steps cannot work with psychedelics.
Yeah, I see that dissonance a lot.
You know, because again, you know, the thing is about the psychedelic journey is about finding out who you are on your terms. It's not about bashing a square peg into a round hole. And that is exactly what the rooms are. That's what NA and AA is. You know, again, we talked about this before, is well, we want you to behave and think in a very, very, very specific way, and we're going to mold you to do that.
Yeah, and I think freedom of expression is a really important part of recovery and part of this rediscovering our identities that you've brought up as a fundamental crux of recovery to begin with, you know?
You know, look, you know, the fundamental aspect is, you know, more often than not, you know, people are saying to you, why are you in addiction? Why are you a fuck up? You know, you're not why are you in addiction? They're saying you are an addiction. You are a fuck up. And we want to be a good and valued member of society. And we're taking you to a place where we can break it down and build you up and turn you into something that we think is acceptable.
Right.
Yeah. And really, at the end of the day, this is the same trauma. And, you know, I said this before, it was the same trauma that brought people into addiction in the first place. So if we can do the right therapeutic work where we can look at the cultural and educational conditions that brought you into a place of profound personal pain where you felt inauthentic and you didn't feel that you knew yourself, because that is what addiction is about. This is what we self-medicate against. We self-medicate against feeling inauthentic. So if we can look at the basis of why you're in pain and understand that, and understand that your movement into addiction perhaps was a perfectly acceptable and reasonable process to get yourself out of pain. And if you can start doing that, then you can start forgiving yourself. And if you can start forgiving yourself, you can start accepting yourself. And if you can start accepting yourself, you can start loving yourself. And if you can start loving yourself, you don't need to put drugs down your throat.
Wow, that was a really beautiful sentiment that you captured. You know, I think it hit all the big points about self-realization, compassion, love. Like all of these things are not mutually exclusive, but fully a part of the psychedelic experience, you know, and a part of the healing that comes with it. And I think maybe it is those are the big ticket items that might be lost in the current more traditional treatment approaches and rehabs and things like that, you know.
And this is my fear for, you know, big business getting into psychedelic work, because I don't think this work, you know, it is about working with the client rather than the client working with your protocol.
Right.
It's really, really important to understand. And, you know, I think we also, it's about actually perhaps disconnecting yourself from the matrix which is making you ill. And, you know, that is a big matrix, you know. The world we live in is an incredibly complicated and incredibly divisive and difficult place to hold your own in.
Right.
And, you know, I think when we look at addiction, you know, I think addiction is everywhere. People are addicted to power. People are addicted to fame. People are addicted to notoriety. You know, everyone wants better shoes. Everyone wants better cars. Everyone wants bigger houses. Everybody feels incomplete if they don't have a flat stomach, but they should be eating this food and they should be eating that food, and et cetera, et cetera. And these are essentially all marketed upon us. You know, and they make people feel really, really incomplete. And so people will become addicted to many, many different ways of feeling okay in the moment, whether it's shoe shop, whether it's buying a new Maserati, whether it's about, you know, screwing somebody over at work, whether it's about working 60 to 70 hours a week to bring the money in. You know, these are all incredibly destructive, addictive behaviors that show us that on a cultural level, we are so disconnected from selves and who we should be. And we're so disconnected from community. So for me, I think part of the psychedelic experience is you have your experience, you kind of look at your conditioned narratives, and you return to a more natural state of being. And for Gaurav, you will understand this better than anybody. Ibogaine is a fantastic medicine. It's a wonderful, beautiful medicine, but the greatest nurse and the greatest doctor is nature in conjunction with play. And if we can get people to start to learn to play again, because they lost the ability to play in childhood because of the traumas attached to them, you know, we find that the whole time. And if we can get people to connect to nature, then they will start finding themselves again. And this is what the integrative, holistic treatment protocol should be about. It should be allow people to understand why they are in addiction in the first place. And the reason people are in addiction in the first place is they're trying to be somebody that is not themselves.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
If they have that understanding, we put them out into nature and we put them to play, then they can start to connect to that rejected child. And they can start to find out who they are, because that rejected child has a whole seam of intelligence and joy and connectivity and wisdom that we've been denying ourselves for a very, very, very long time. because we've been trying to fit in with the conditioned narratives around us. So I see the future of recovery as it's about people connecting with, and some great work by Professor David Luke, who's an eco-psychologist. And there's a lot of work been done around this about mental health, but for people to be connecting to nature, to be connecting to animals, be connecting to the blue sky, to be connecting to green fields or the sand or the surf, that's a good way to start getting better. I have a lot of rehabs phoning me up saying, well, we've created this amazing, or when I say rehabs, I mean, I'm talking about Ibogaine providers, and they're saying we've created our own aftercare facility. And what we do is we get up in the morning and we do 2 hours of holotropic breathing or an hour of holotropic breathing, then we do an hour of meditation, then we have group session and we check in with our feelings, etc., etc. Then we have lunch, and then in the afternoon we have individual therapy followed by yoga and meditation. Isn't that fantastic? And I'm going, no, fuck off. Where's the frisbee?
Yeah, agreed.
Why does recovery have to be a burden?
Right.
Why is this idea that to get into good recovery, you have to be floating 6 inches above a mountain?
Right.
It's wrong. What you need to do is start connecting to that lost child inside. And the best meditation in the world, the best way to get you into the moment, to get you into the now, to allow you to just feel yourself, is to learn how to play again.
Yeah, I think
that's a really, really important, thing that nobody is looking at the moment.
I think one of the more interesting things that psychedelic-based recovery has shown me, and just from what I've observed, being in the position I'm in and writing about it and everything, is that it really offers, if done properly and in the way that you're kind of detailing it, is it offers people an opportunity to get excited and look forward to a different life, like right now. I think the traditional modality, it's like, oh man, I don't want to go to rehab, and you're kicking and screaming, before you go in that door. Like, what if it was a different situation entirely? What if it was like, okay, this is my life now, but I have this opportunity now to make something so much more exciting for myself and so much more fulfilling and rewarding. And I think the psychedelic integrated model of treatment can hopefully change people's and particularly people in addictions perceptions and attitudes around what recovery and treatment looks like. And I think it's important to, like you said, remember to have fun, in that model.
I think that's absolutely essential. And I think, the really, really important thing is that the psychedelic experience allows you to start to own your own narrative. The reason we're in addictions is because we don't own our own narrative. We're always eating out of somebody else's pot as to how we're living our life. So if you can have the psychedelic experience and you can find out who you are and you can start owning your narratives, and this is the really, really exciting thing about doing an Ibogaine journey or an ayahuasca journey, that's your journey. That belongs to you 100%. It can't be taken away. It can't be torn apart by somebody else. It can't be, whatever that experience you had in that psychedelic journey or in that psychedelic realm, that is yours and yours alone, which makes this form of recovery profoundly personal and profoundly intimate.
Right. Yeah, it's not one size fits all, and it never should have been, and it isn't, and I'm glad that psychedelic medicine and particularly plant medicine is showing us that, because the experience is never the same for everybody. It's never the same for you from time to time too. It's so highly personalized and unique, and I think it's a testament to this next generation of personalized medicine.
I think you've just reminded me of something, and I think this is really, really important to say. And I think this is something, there's a very, very sort of regretful or potentially dark side of the psychedelic industry we look at, where actually we are treating ayahuasca and ibogaine and magic mushrooms as commodities, as hair shampoo or hair conditioner. I can just go in and I buy it and I use it, and that's it. And I don't think that any of these profound, beautiful, ancient medicines should be disrespected in such a way. If you want to get out of addiction and use plant medicines, it's not the quick fix. It's not the magic bullet. You have to put intentionality, integrity, respect, and reverence into that process. And you have to give yourself time post the experience to continue putting intentionality, integrity, respect, and reverence into the process. And if you do that, you'll have a fantastic, opportunity to grow, a fantastic opportunity to become a fully fledged student at Earth School rather than a victim. And I think the commercialization of Ibogaine and certainly within the Ibogaine, I only work with maybe 7 or 8 clinics now. It's not through choice. I would like to work with more, but I can't, because most of them run a revolving door, in and out, cash cow facility. No pre-treatment, no post-treatment.
Yeah, and the plant itself doesn't look too fondly on the repeat customers or the repeat patients. It becomes it's not. I guess at one point I want to drive home to people as we close our talk here is it's not the Weissman method. It is not the going under anesthesia and taking a chemical to purge your body of opiates and you wake up fine. Like it's not that simple. And for that reason, it has a much higher success rate than something like the Weissman method, because there's a whole process that we've been discussing this whole episode that takes place that you're conscious for. It's something that's consciously happening to you. You're not just waiting for the drugs to leave you and thinking that the problem ends there. It's a whole new experience to learn so much more.
See, and exactly what you're saying is this wonderful thing about chasing the experience and chasing the process and making yourself available to, and this is what I do believe that we should, if we do anything well, we should be putting obstacles in people's way to getting psychedelics. I know that sounds kind of, but you've got to show up to session, or you've got to talk about and engender a little bit of
accountability.
Yeah. And again, it comes back to these 4 words: respect, reverence, intentionality, and integrity. But if the client finds themselves putting that into the process of taking psychedelics, and then into the process of integrating them, and into the process of getting their new life, they're not actually putting respect, reverence, intentionality, integrity into the psychedelic experience. They're being compassionate to self. And for people in addiction, that's a fucking game changer.
Oh, I love that, man. It is a game changer. Absolutely. Dude, I think we've had such an incredible discussion today. The technical errors will be able to be worked out. Yeah, absolutely.
I'll tell you what, Gaurav, if we could adjust without these breaks, I think it would have been just phenomenal. We could have We'll
record another one for sure. When your computer's up and running, we'll schedule another one for sure. But in the meantime,
do you want to say goodbye, and I can say goodbye to you beautifully?
yeah, no, absolutely. We'll do that. And Anders, I wanted to just give you an opportunity to tell people where they can find out about you and find out about your work. If you wanted to share that with our audience, that would be great.
Okay. Thank you for that, Gaurav. I mean, most of my clients come through me through 6, 7, or 8 Ibogaine centers who I've got a very good working relationship, and who these particular centers I really, really trust, because they put the client first and foremost, and they've created a protocol which includes a lot beyond just the ingesting of Ibogaine.
Right.
So a lot of my clients come through there. My own sort of personal clients and people who are wanting to get, help with plant medicines or Ibogaine for addiction or stress or burnout. If they come to www.ibogaine-counselling.com. Now, counselling is spelled the English way, which is double L.
Okay.
And we also have another website called psychedelicsforaddiction.com.
Okay. Oh, brilliant.
And yeah, reach out to me there, and I'll get back in touch with anybody. I'm very, very, very willing to offer advice to begin with, and that's normally comes free. It's about perhaps sowing the seed is the most important thing to begin with.
Absolutely. Well, Anders, it's been a serious pleasure, not just this podcast, but from the first day that we connected, what a journey.
I've the thing is, Gaurav, I kind of look at your journey, and I think this is really important for a lot of people to understand, is that actually Gaurav has walked the walk and he's talked the talk. He's actually taken time out. He's gone out into nature and he's looked after himself, and self-care has become the most important fundamental ritual of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't put self-care first, there's no point trying.
You're right.
You've done it. You're walking the walk. And I love the fact that you took yourself out into Mexico and got yourself back into nature in a massive way and learned to play again.
Yeah.
And if you look at your own journey, Gaurav, over the last, I don't know how long, and it's been pretty phenomenal. I mean, try doing that through regular therapy and regular work. I mean, you've just been miles and miles and miles behind where you are now.
Yeah, man. Very true. Oh, beautiful. Anders, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having for being a guest on our show. We really appreciate having you. I look forward to our next conversation. And yeah, thanks for a great discussion about addiction, Ibogaine, and psychedelic medicine, brother. We'll talk again soon.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
bye-bye.
Everybody, this is Gaurav Dubey. This is the PsyFi podcast, where we talk to leading clinicians, researchers, practitioners, and industry experts to unravel the mystery of psychedelic science. This is Anders Beatty, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you.
Thanks for joining the Psy-Fi series, brought to you by Microdose and the Conscious Fund. Visit our website at www.microdose.buzz.